Do you remember the last time you were bored? Not distracted, not scrolling, not watching something. Just bored. Sitting with your thoughts, staring at the ceiling, letting your mind wander wherever it wanted to go. Think hard. Because for most people, they genuinely cannot remember. And that is not an accident. I want to tell you about a meeting that happened in Silicon Valley in 2004. A group of engineers sat in a room and asked themselves one question. Not how do we make a useful product? Not how do we help people connect? The question they asked was this: how do we make it so that people cannot stop? That meeting changed everything about how you live your life today. And you were never supposed to find out about it. I want to start with something personal. I remember being 17 years old. Summer, no phone. My parents could not afford one. And I remember spending an entire afternoon just lying in the backyard looking at clouds. Not thinking about anything in particular. Just existing. There was a kind of peace in that afternoon that I have spent years trying to find again. I did not know it then. But that afternoon was the last time my brain was truly free. Because the year after that, the smartphone arrived. And something fundamental about human attention died quietly. Here is what they discovered. The human brain has what psychologists call a negativity bias. We are wired to pay more attention to threats than to rewards. It kept our ancestors alive. If you heard a rustle in the bushes, you stopped. You paid attention. You could not look away until you determined whether it was dangerous. The engineers in Silicon Valley learned this. And they built entire systems around it. Every notification is a rustle in the bushes. Your brain cannot ignore it. Not because you are weak, because you are human. And they knew that before they wrote a single line of code. Let me tell you what variable reward actually means. Because this is the mechanism they used, and once you understand it, you will never look at your phone the same way again. B.F. Skinner was a psychologist who studied behavior in the 1950s. He put rats in boxes. He gave them levers. Sometimes pressing the lever gave food. Sometimes it gave nothing. The rats who got food every time eventually stopped pressing. They pressed when they were hungry, then stopped. But the rats who got food unpredictably, they never stopped pressing. They pressed frantically, desperately, compulsively. Even when they were not hungry. Even when they were exhausted. They could not stop. Now look at your Instagram feed. Sometimes there is something interesting. Sometimes there is nothing. You never know which one is coming next. You are the rat. The phone is the lever. And the engineers who built it knew exactly what they were building. There is a man named Ozzy Raskin. He invented the infinite scroll. That feature where the page never ends. You just keep scrolling, and there is always more. He said in an interview that he has spent years feeling guilty about it. He said, "It is as if they took behavioral cocaine and sprinkled it over the interface." That is not a metaphor from me. That is the man who built it, describing what he built. He estimated that infinite scroll alone costs humanity 200,000 hours of human attention every single day. Every single day. Think about what that means. 200,000 hours of people lying in bed at night. Not sleeping. Not thinking. Not dreaming. just scrolling into nothing. Here is what they are actually doing to your brain. Every time you get a like, a comment, a notification, your brain releases a small amount of dopamine. The same chemical released by food, by physical touch, by love. Over time, your brain begins to associate the phone with survival-level reward. It stops producing as much dopamine on its own. Because why would it, when the phone produces it so reliably? And so the things that used to make you feel alive. A walk outside, a conversation, a book, a quiet evening. Those things start to feel flat, colorless. Not because you changed, because your baseline was chemically altered. Without your consent, without your knowledge, by people who knew exactly what they were doing. I want to be very specific about something. This is not about blaming yourself. I spent years thinking something was wrong with me, that I had no discipline, that I was weak, that other people could put their phones down and I somehow could not. And then I learned what was actually being done. And the anger I felt was clarifying. Because anger at the right target is not a bad thing. It is information. And the information is this. You were not weak. You were targeted by some of the most sophisticated psychological engineering ever deployed against human beings. And the fact that it worked says nothing about your character. It says everything about the resources they used to design it. So what do you do with this? Because I am not going to tell you to delete every app. That is not realistic advice. What I am going to tell you is this. The first line of defense against any system of control is knowing the system exists. You cannot resist something you cannot see. But now you can see it. Now when you reach for your phone at 2 a.m. for no reason, you know what that is. That is not you. That is the lever calling the rat. And you can pause. You can ask yourself, who is this serving right now? Me or them? That question changes everything. Before I go, I want you to try something this week. 1 hour no phone. Not in another room, off. Just sit with what comes up. The restlessness, the reaching, the strange anxiety of having nothing to scroll through. That discomfort you feel is your brain trying to remember who it was before they got to it. Give it time. It still knows. Subscribe to Shadowmaxims. Every week, something they would prefer you did not know. See you in the next one.